As the global energy crisis deepens, China doubles down on ambitions to create clean, limitless energy, including a race to unlock nuclear fusion.
You read Xi Jinping's speeches, it's tech, 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 and it's almost like the party views this as a panacea for all the problems that China might be facing. So they are willing to make these big bets on almost these kind of moonshot projects like nuclear fusion.
China's clean technology exports surge, but other exports come under pressure.
The shock in energy and transportation costs from the Iran war weighing on global demand for Chinese exports.
The Philippines seeks a reset of ties with China as its economy comes under stress.
Marcos has already called it a China reset because at the moment, its economic security is far more important than its maritime security.
As fractures emerge in the NATO alliance, how will the European Union navigate ties with China?
NATO's a paper tiger. NATO is us. And when we needed them, they haven't helped at all.
Could China have some influence over Iran as the world seeks a path to peace?
Typically, China has economic leverage or economic influence over countries that act like normal, rational economic countries. Iran's not like this.
有一些伊朗的分析人士和媒体就指责说，中国是一个顺境的朋友，他比较乐于低价购买这个被制裁的石油啊，但是却在关键时期不愿提供实质帮助。
中国的几千年历史就已经证明冤冤相报何时了。所以，首先中国去否定掉了当下危机各方他们所采取军事和武力的手段去解决这项问题的根本的路径，这是第一。第二，中国也从来没有想过未来要成为世界警察。
The war in Iran has driven up the cost of oil and natural gas. As countries grapple with an energy crisis, the Chinese keep calm and carry on. They had begun preparing for a moment like this over a decade ago.
中国在党的18大以后啊，就越来越重视能源安全。差不多在2014年前后啊，把能源安全呢，纳入到了中国的总体国家安全观里面。所以过去的10多年，中国在能源安全的各项措施上呢，我觉得进展得非常的顺利。从能源通道的角度看呢，我们不仅仅只有这个过去传统的经过霍尔木兹海峡、经过马六甲海峡的这个捍卫这个通道的安全，那么更重要的呢，我们也开辟了这个“一带一路”尤其是陆上的这个能源管道的这个安全和这个创新多元化。过去的10多年，中国实现了清洁能源的伟大的转型这个转型进程呢，应该说是全世界转型速度最快转型规模最大。
In March, China unveiled its 15th five-year plan covering the years 2026 to 2030. The plan doubles down on the transition to clean energy. Particular focus is given to nuclear fusion.
You read Xi Jinping's speeches, he comes across like a tech bro. It's tech, 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 and it's almost like the party views this as a panacea for all the problems that China might be facing, whether that's demographics, geopolitics, national security, economic growth. And through technology development, you can solve all of those issues. So they are willing to make these big bets and chuck a lot of resources on almost these kind of moonshot projects like nuclear fusion, which, if it does succeed, is potentially transformative.
Fusion is basically how our sun powers itself. It is about fusing atoms together to release huge amounts of energy. Scientists say this process doesn't carry the risk of meltdowns, and it doesn't produce long-lasting radioactive waste. In other words, it harnesses the technology of the stars to potentially provide clean, limitless energy. The Chinese government and private sector have poured billions of dollars into this facility to try and make that happen. This is the Tokamak East facility in Anhui Province, China. It is also dubbed the artificial sun. Scientists here have figured out a way to keep plasma stable at extreme densities. This was previously seen as a major obstacle in the development of nuclear fusion. With this finding, humanity is one step closer to unlocking unlimited energy. Though it's still anyone's guess how many more steps it will take to get there.
核聚变它属于一种比较前沿的技术，是不是能够落地，我们其实还不是特别清楚。您对它实现的可能性有什么样的看法？
所谓要建一个人造太阳那么这种技术呢，当下在网络中呢这个炒作的非常的火。那么这个核聚变技能既然能够提出来，而且从国家舆论的角度来讲还在传播，那么一定就意味着中国的这个技术水平已经达到了一定的能力。
One advantage that China has in the race to unlock nuclear fusion is its vast industrial supply chain. A project of this magnitude requires high-end forged metal components capable of withstanding extreme temperatures, radiation, and magnetic fields. Something no single company can do alone.
从2023年的60几家，现在发展到将近300家的产业链，基本上80%来自长三角，这个趋势是非常好，有助于缩短聚变投入商业应用的进程。
Fusion is a project for the future. Meanwhile, China scales up what it already has working: nuclear fission.
China views power generation as a life or death issue for the economic development and for the living standards of the Chinese people. China is building, as we speak, the largest amount of reactors compared with any other country. And also China has approved reactors to be built in the coming years and decades, more so than any other country in the world. Why? Because China does want to significantly reduce reliance on coal power generation down to about 35%.
In December 2025, China announced it will start commercial operation of its homegrown small modular reactor, the Linglong-1, located on Hainan Island. Compared to conventional nuclear reactors, small modular reactors, or SMRs, are, as the name implies, smaller. They are also modular, allowing them to be batched together to scale up, depending on energy demands. They can operate as safely and efficiently as their bigger cousins, and are expected to be cheaper and quicker to build. Besides nuclear, China has also laid down targets to increase the share of non-fossil fuels in total energy consumption to around 25% by 2030, up from 20% currently. The momentum is clear. Last year, newly installed wind and solar capacity exceeded 430 kilowatts, a 22% year-on-year increase. With an energy crisis unfolding from the war in Iran, Chinese Premier Li Qiang inspected the country's green energy supply chain on the 1st of April. From solar manufacturing to hydropower to nuclear core components, Premier Li stressed the importance of further investments in these technologies.
中国的这个煤炭的这个使用，占中国能源使用比例大概有50%到55%左右。那么石油天然气使用呢，差不多15%到20%左右。那么还有就是清洁能源使用水能风能光能这些使用差不多是20%左右。那么剩下大概只有5个百分点左右是来于核能。因为伊朗的这次中东的这个危机我觉得进一步让中国人会意识到这个能源通道的不安全，会让中国这个企业，尤其是能源企业，尤其是新能源企业，更加认识到新能源的重要性。 也让中国的这个决策层和社会的大众都认识到能源自主的重要性。如果我们在未来的30年继续推进能源的自主、能源的转型，我们能够在光伏、风能、水能这些层面上，实现中国能源使用的到60%、70%甚至80%以上。那么那个时候，中国对石油、对天然气的使用将会降到20%以下，相当于倒过来了啊。那么这个时候，中国就基本上已经实现了能源的自主。
Despite years of forward planning, China's economy is not immune to current oil shocks. China is the world's largest importer of fossil fuels, and nearly 40% of its crude comes from Gulf producers. It is also well known that China is the top buyer of Iranian oil, even if this data doesn't show up in Chinese customs records.
There is a price shock coming through, but given the level of inflation in China is very low already, that price shock is not too much of a danger for the economy. And where the real issue for China is coming from is the impact on global demand and the knock-on impact on Chinese exports.
The stresses on China's economy are starting to show.
The shock in energy and transportation costs from the Iran war weighing on global demand for Chinese exports. A growth in outbound shipments skidded 2.5% on year. That's a 5-month low, sharply down from a double-digit gain the first 2 months.
The big headwind facing the China economy is a lack of domestic demand. That's mainly on the consumption side, and there are a number of factors playing into that. The household has been relentlessly hit by COVID, property, the internet crackdown, tariffs and high oil prices, which hit the consumer as well, will not help that recovery. Where the real damage comes from is the potential damage to exports. Exports have been the key growth driver the past couple of years, really extraordinary gains in trade. And if the rest of the world is suffering, the scope for China to continue to export its way to growth is limited. So that, for me, that is the real crux of the Iran conflict and the potential backlash onto China.
The war in Iran has unleashed economic turmoil around the world. Gas supplies are squeezed in India, forcing hundreds of factories to close, while restaurants and households run out of cooking fuel. In Thailand, queues stretch at petrol pumps as fuel prices surge. A war thousands of kilometers away is hitting livelihoods everywhere. Fishing boats sit idle as fuel becomes unaffordable. Tourism numbers are plunging, and public anger is mounting. On the 25th of March, the Philippines became the first country to declare an energy emergency.
The first to be hit is the public transportation industry because diesel has more than doubled, and most of public vehicles, including the jeepneys, the buses, rely on diesel. So therefore, the transport industry is the hardest hit. Less vehicles for public transport means less mobility. So we're seeing difficulty for people to get to their jobs. Many have, including the government, have advised to do 4-day work weeks. Just when things have normalized, kids now are going back to online learning. It's harvest season right now. And so, for example, some vegetable farmers are unable to bring their agricultural products to the market simply because there's no diesel. We're seeing news reports of vegetables not being harvested, that they rot. We're seeing fruits just on the streets because they've been unable to be shipped to the city centers where they could be traded and they could be sold. There are already talks of, for example, a stoppage of big ticket infrastructure projects that has been proposed. So there's already a notion that the government might not be able to spend which is quite important for economic recovery in the Philippines. The engine of growth is that government invests in public infrastructure that could pump prime the economy. But this energy crisis is gonna stop those proposals, and therefore the ability of the economy to recover fully.
Across Southeast Asia, public opinion of America has tanked. A State of Southeast Asia survey released by the ISIS Yusof Ishak Institute in Singapore on April 7th found that 52% of respondents across Southeast Asia would align with China over the United States if forced to choose sides. A marked shift in sentiments from results a year ago, when 47.7% of respondents chose China. Support for aligning with China was strongest in Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Timor-Leste, and Thailand. In contrast, support for the U.S. remained strong in the Philippines, its ally. That might soon be changing.
The United States is one of the most favored countries by the Filipino public. I think it was for maybe 10 to 15 years ago, it was the first. Now it's second to Japan. And this is because of the strong alliance between the two countries. At the moment, this war is very unpopular all over the world. I think the perception in the Philippines is this is a largely unnecessary course of military action, of which the negative repercussions is felt by every Filipino. So this was a decision made by a handful of people, and yet the negative ripple effects affects every one of those 115 million Filipinos who are now suffering and undergoing economic hardship. So it's quite difficult to see the U.S. and the Trump administration in a positive light, given that this could have all been prevented if only there was some restraint and responsibility by the old superpower and old friend of the Philippines.
As the oil crisis deepens in the Philippines, President Marcos Jr. speaks of a reset in ties with China. The Philippines has been navigating a difficult diplomatic relationship with China over the last few years, with frequent reports of confrontation in the South China Sea between the two coast guards.
Expect more Chinese aggression in the South China Sea. The question now becomes is that, what's the Philippine reaction? Is it gonna be still transparency? We might see a change in posturing of the Philippines, right? Because at the moment, its economic security is far more important than its maritime security.
In late March, Philippines President Ferdinand Marcos said he was open to restarting talks with China on joint oil and gas development in contested parts of the South China Sea. Chinese state media reported that China's willingness to engage in joint exploration reflects regional collaboration to ensure shared security and prosperity.
最重要一点，我觉得还是中国致力于去修复中非关系的一种努力啊。那么中国当然希望通过亲诚惠容，搞好整个周边关系，让所有的周边国家都能够享受到因为和平稳定带来的发展的红利。
This has also something to do, I think, with two things at the start of the year that are very important in the mind of the Marcos Jr. government. First is our ASEAN chairship. And China is a key ASEAN dialogue partner. And the Philippines, being chair of ASEAN, would want to somehow engage China diplomatically as not only the Philippines, but as ASEAN chair. The second is that the Philippines is running for a non-permanent member in the Security Council of the United Nations. And of course, while it's the General Assembly that decides on non-permanent members, the permanent five, that includes China, still has a lot of sway.
Many details will need to be ironed out if the two countries embark on joint oil and gas development. What is the model of partnership? Will China be an investor or an owner? Is there enough strategic trust?
The details is, I think, the one that will be the huge challenge for any joint development between China and the Philippines. And it should not be tantamount to either country dampening or undermining their own sovereignty or sovereign rights and maritime entitlements under international law.
A report from the Philippine National Security Council, just days after the joint development announcements, shows the difficulties that continue to plague Sino-Philippines relations. Elsewhere in Asia, another U.S. ally, South Korea, faces economic pressure from the war in Iran.
고유가 피해 지원금을 새로 마련해 고유가, 고물가의 이중 부담을 겪는 시민들의 숨통을 틔워드리도록 하겠습니다.
Trump's call for allies to help secure the Strait of Hormuz was also denounced by protesters in Seoul.
트럼프 행정부는 동맹이라는 보울 좋은 명분 아래 우리 군을 호르무즈 해협이라는 사지로 내몰고자 노골적으로 압박하고 있습니다. 이것은 명백한 주권 침해이자 대한민국 청년들을 미국의 총알바지 용병으로 취급하는 모욕적 처사입니다. 우리는 결단코 미국의 불법적 침략 전쟁에 우리 청년들을 보낼 수 없습니다.
The South Korea leadership, like other U.S. allies, finds itself with twin problems of having to manage diplomatic relations with President Trump and the fallout of an energy crisis. All across the world, as oil prices spike and economic contraction bites, governments are having to think hard about their energy sources and also draw up new plans for the future. In the near term, many countries, including China, are turning back to coal as part of their energy mix. In the longer term, the energy crisis has re-energized calls for clean energy. China produces roughly 80% of the world's solar panels and dominates wind turbine and lithium battery manufacturing. Its EVs now lead sales in the market globally. And through its Belt and Road Initiative, it has built hydroelectric dams in countries across Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America.
People want cheap energy, which would be clean and also secure and controlled in their hands. And green energy fulfills all of those factors. China, as by far the leading producer of clean tech, both terms in volume and in price competitiveness, is standing to gain, I think, quite substantially from this. I expect a big pickup in investment in these areas, both in developed markets and emerging economies.
In 2025, China's total foreign trade surpassed $6.3 trillion US dollars, yielding a record-breaking trade surplus of nearly $1.2 trillion. This export boom was driven in large part by green and high-tech industries. According to China's State Council, exports of EVs, lithium batteries, and solar panels rose by 27.1%, while wind turbines skyrocketed by 48.7% last year. Alongside those trade figures is another number that surprised analysts across the world. China's Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI projects, reached a record $213.5 billion in value last year. BRI investments had peaked in 2016, a decade ago, with many thinking that the BRI initiative was starting to taper off. But China's flagship project is back, bigger and more ambitious than before, with many clean energy projects added across the globe, boosting its clean tech exports.
It's now less about infrastructure, more about manufacturing, whereas with infrastructure, it's quite often top-down, government-to-government relations. This time around, it's the corporates that are looking for profit that are taking the lead in these activities. Solar panels and factories in Vietnam and Malaysia, BYD and EV companies, basically everywhere, Brazil, Eastern Europe, Morocco. It runs the gamut of the global economy, primarily in relatively low-cost manufacturing areas. But even in parts of Germany, we're seeing Chinese companies come in and take over disused auto production plants there as well. So it's quite a significant shift to the previous Belt and Road model, where it was infrastructure top-down, less of a profit concern. This time around, it's the corporates driving it, looking for profits.
China is also exporting its nuclear reactors. According to Chinese media, their flagship model, the Hualong-1, is currently the most widely adopted reactor design globally. China has 41 of them, either operating or under construction, each with the capability of supplying enough electricity for 1 million people. Countries like Pakistan and Argentina have already signed on. Limited fiscal capacity after the COVID pandemic has made many countries wary of taking on such a large, debt-heavy project. This could soon change. In November 2025, Chinese companies made their sales pitches at the World Nuclear Exhibition in Paris. Participants from over 80 countries attended. The Chinese pavilion was the second largest after France's. The pitch? That Chinese reactors are cheaper than alternatives from France, the US, or Japan. They can be paid for in local currencies and built much faster. For countries currently facing an energy crisis, that pitch may now appear more attractive.
We're giving them till tomorrow, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, and after that, they're gonna have no bridges, they're gonna have no power plants. Stone Ages, yeah. We can bomb the hell out of them.
In early April, as the war in Iran reached a dangerous juncture, Pakistan and China helped broker a temporary ceasefire.
中巴作为全球南方重要国家，发出理性、正义呼声。
On the 11th of April, Iran and U.S. officials met in Islamabad, but no agreement was reached, and the U.S. began a naval blockade of Iran shortly after.
相关研究这些问题的这些中东学者，他认为中国倡导政治解决，坚决不干涉内政，坚持不干涉内政，主张以发展促和平的这种和平方案，并没有给中东带来真正的和平。他这种评论的这种核心的观点是，中国参与的中东和平方案成效有限。您对此有什么样的看法？
中国是中东危机的第三方，是中东危机的旁观者。作为一个旁观者啊。我们尽全力的去捍卫、呵护中国和中东各方的正常的贸易往来、正常的交往，并且在实际的这个对外的举动中，保持着劝和促谈的这种路径这种呼吁，本身就是对和平的巨大的贡献。试想一下，如果中国不这么做，我们中国哪怕断一点点刚才做的那些路径，我们不再进口或者推行跟这次危机各方的贸易那么各方都会受损这才是对当下战争的更多的这个破坏。第二，如果中国不推行所谓劝和促谈的这种主张，中国无论站在哪一方无论站在伊朗一方或者站在美以一方，都是对于这次战争的进一步的冲击。所以说，中国采取当下这个措施，是能够作为一个第三方的大国，能够持的最好的最优解没有这更好的解，像中国当下这么做了。
Some observers are hopeful about the role that China can play in brokering peace, given the economic relationship between China and Iran.
President Xi urges respect for sovereignty in the Middle East as China pledges a constructive role in peace efforts.
Iran's economy, which has been strangled by U.S. sanctions for many years, had depended on China as a lifeline. Much of the country's oil extraction infrastructure was built by the Chinese, and most of the country's oil exports go to China. China doesn't just buy oil, it is also Iran's top trading partner in many other sectors of the economy. Chinese machines prevail in Iran's transportation network. The buses in Tehran are mostly from China. Chinese car brands dominate the road. And Tehran's metro system was built from scratch with Chinese capital and Chinese engineers. The train cars that run on it are, of course, also Chinese. Confucius institutes that teach Mandarin have mushroomed across many Iranian cities.
Professor, you live in the Middle East and you've been tracking China-Middle East relations for so many years. We know that Beijing is one of Tehran's most important economic partners, but what kind of sway does China really have over Iran?
China has very limited influence over Iran. The truth of the matter is China-Iran relationship always has a third point on the triangle, and that's Washington. And China's relationship with the U.S. is far more consequential than anything it does with Iran. And often when it's anything consequential, China's relationship with the U.S. Takes precedence. And this has happened time and again, over the past, say, 12 years or so since the run-up to the JCPOA. So in Iran, this creates a lot of resentment and frustration because China's meant to be this very important partner. But they know as well as anybody that China will throw them under the bus to maintain the relationship with the U.S.
The Iran war is the second time in 2026 that a friend of China was attacked by America. Back in January, the United States sent a clear message to China with the capture of Maduro in Venezuela, and that is to stay away from Latin America.
We don't want to have China there.
Much has already been uncovered about China-Venezuela ties. China invests more in Venezuela than in any other Latin American country. China was Venezuela's largest oil buyer, accounting for around 80% of all oil exports. And Venezuela has been supporting de-dollarization by pricing oil in yuan since September 2017. When Maduro was captured by the United States, China condemned U.S. actions in the United Nations and put out a series of statements. Its actions ended there.
无论在这个伊朗问题还是在委内瑞拉的问题上，中国似乎还是选择保持了克制，不轻易介入。于是，就是有一些伊朗的分析人士和媒体就指责说，中国是一个顺境的朋友，他比较乐于低价购买这个被制裁的石油啊，但是却在关键时期不愿提供实质帮助。这个美国的评论人员也指责说，这个中国在危机时刻保持沉默，无所作为。您能不能简要的阐述一下中国对自身全球大国角色的这个定位？
我们不相信，光靠军事动武手段能够解决当下的任何一场冲突。中国的几千年历史就已经证明冤冤相报何时了。所以，首先中国去否定掉了当下危机各方他们所采取军事和武力的手段去解决这项问题的根本的路径，这是第一。第二，中国的这个所谓的全球领导权，也不愿去重复传统列强路径现实主义路径中的所谓用权力或者用更多的胁迫手段去压迫各方听从你的那种领导权。一个好的领导者只需要把自己做到最好，那么自然而然越来越多人会跟从你，愿意跟你合作。那过去的40年，中国越来越好，全世界差不多150个国家和地区都视中国为第一大贸易伙伴国，这本身就是巨大的领导力嘛。用实际行动就已经证明了中国的全球领导力。
The United States has demonstrated global leadership over the past 70 years through a system of allies. For many years, America had around 800 military bases in other countries. These bases ranged from small radar facilities to giant mini-Americas, costing an estimated $100 billion annually. The U.S. also provided a nuclear umbrella to countries like South Korea and Japan.
美国式的这种军事同盟体系，在过去的80年左右已经可以宣告是完全失败了。既没有保护美国本土的安全，你看美国还受到911的威胁等等，美国国内的这种社会的这个冲突，也没有保护所谓美国盟友的安全。你看美国的盟友欧洲也好，或者其他地区也好，都出现了这样那样的军事冲突，更没有使得世界变得更安全、更和平。所以这套体系本身就已经证明是失败的。那中国为什么还要去效仿或者复制呢？中国也从来没有想过未来要成为世界警察。
China has a good relationship with both Iran and the Gulf countries in the Middle East. But experts say the various peace plans it has put forward have had limited impact despite these ties.
The Middle East is largely a place where China makes money and gets energy. But in terms of solving the hot war in Gaza or the crisis between Israel and Hezbollah, that's beyond China's scope. And I think October 7th, 2023 really showed everybody once again there are issues that China's not really willing or able to wade into meaningfully. I mean, they're willing to support regional actors. They're willing to cooperate with countries in the United Nations. But in terms of solving, the Gaza crisis, solving the Lebanon crisis, this is something that's, requires a much deeper pool of diplomatic experience than China's accumulated here. And I think most people in the region realized when we saw October 7th in the aftermath, and China played a very modest diplomatic role. When the Red Sea shipping crisis started to kick in and people thought this is going to actually hit China where it hurts, in the pocketbook, maybe we could expect to see a bigger Chinese involvement. And once again, China's involvement was again quite modest. And I think at that moment, a lot of leaders and actors around the region remembered, right, China is the country that we look to for infrastructure construction, renewable energy projects, trade, not so much for, really top shelf support on diplomatic or security concerns.
In January, President Trump threatened to take Greenland by force, causing panic in the European Union. He later rescinded that threat. Weeks later, he lashed out at NATO for not helping to secure the Strait of Hormuz in the Iran war.
NATO's a paper tiger. Putin's not afraid of NATO. Putin's afraid of us, very afraid of us. And he's explained it to me a lot of times. I got to know him very well. I know him very well. NATO's a paper tiger. NATO is us. And when we needed them, but we didn't need them, by the way. We didn't need them, obviously, because they haven't helped at all. Just the opposite. They've actually gone out of their way not to help. They didn't even want to give us landing strips.
Earlier, Trump had said that he is considering pulling the U.S. out of NATO after the allies refused to support the war in Iran. This rupture in the America-European alliance has had profound implications, especially for Europe-China relations.
过去的几年啊，欧洲的自主性受到了巨大的冲击啊，尤其一些国家过度的依赖于美国啊，使得欧洲失去了自主性。那么北约呢，过去的1年多呢，是受到了巨大的冲击。我觉得这是对的。北约本来就是历史的垃圾，本身就应该被抛弃在历史的垃圾堆中啊，垃圾箱中。它早就不适合这个世界了啊，所以北约的名存实亡，它帮助了欧洲的开始自主的思考未来的战略的进程。那么欧洲一些领导人呢，这个重新思考中国的战略价值啊，加强跟中国的合作，中国乐见其成。
In January, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer went to Beijing. This visit was the first by a British Prime Minister in 8 years. and form part of a wider effort to strengthen UK-China relations. In February, Beijing hosted German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. In a statement, the Chancellor said Germany must seize growth opportunities despite unfair competition such as Chinese state subsidies and market access restrictions. In April, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez met President Xi. The meeting between the two leaders is their fourth in 4 years. Spain has strongly opposed the US-Israeli war in Iran, which Mr. Sanchez has described as illegal. Europe-China ties seem primed for improvement after several difficult years, but two issues continue to be a thorn in the relationship.
The first is Russia-China relations. A very strong no-limits partnership, as Xi Jinping set out some years ago, and the economic relationship only continues to deepen. So there are, of course, concerns, particularly in Eastern Europe, in Germany, in France, around the strength of that Moscow-Beijing relationship. The other thorn, and I think this one is one that will grow bigger and perhaps more painful, is the economic relationship. And until quite recently, Europe-China relations were very complementary. China was growing by investing and building, and to do that, it needed high-end European capital equipment. Now that relationship has shifted from friendly to competitive. China is producing these high-end equipment, these automotives, advanced manufactured goods, and that relationship is now increasingly difficult. And Germany, for once, is starting to suffer something of a second China shock. It's not quite as acute yet for Germany. You still see quite a few BMWs and Audis in China, but that pain threshold is ratcheting higher, and I think Europe will have to face the reality of a China that is significantly more competitive than them in a number of core European industries.
In April, the European Union was supposed to meet to discuss its Beijing policy. That meeting got postponed so the EU could deal with the Iran crisis instead. Topics tabled on the agenda included the overcapacity debate and how the influx of Chinese products were allegedly threatening Europe's industrial base. Europe has a steeply growing trade deficit with China, whose exports to Europe were up more than 8% last year. Germany's economy is being throttled by a more competitive China that has overtaken its previous manufacturing dominance in many industries, especially in automotives. It has been widely reported that Germany was losing about 10,000 manufacturing jobs a month.
相比于未来人类应对气候变化这种碳中和的进程，就目前而言，再多的清洁能源的使用都还不够呢，是这个供给不足不是供给过剩所以我觉得这是基本的一个概念这些所谓炮制中国绿色技术、绿色能源产能过剩那些声音他们都没搞明白。但是这些声音它的立足点，所谓的过剩，是说中国技术的过剩、中国产能的过剩，是相比于他们国家生产不出来那么多技术而言的，是对于他们的市场并没有使用他们本国的技术而言的，那么使得他们自己本国因为这些产品的进入而感到了危机和某种层面的威胁感。那么这个时候采取的方式不是去构陷和污蔑抹黑中国的清洁能源产品，而是应该向内求，问本国怎么样能够推进更好的创新和研发。
As the conflict in Iran drags on, many newspapers around the world run headlines proclaiming the winner, China.
中国学术界、中国智库界、中国舆论界从来不会以中国是否是胜者或者败者的角度去思考中国在这次中东危机中的 最终的结果或者角色，因为中国本身就不是这次中东危机的单四方，谈何有胜者或者败者的角色呢？如果未来长期处在一个相对低迷的状态呢，那么对中国经济来讲呢，肯定不是利好的消息。中国的经济发展的一个非常重要的国际目标呢，就是希望中国经济企业走出去，帮助各个国家尽可能的发展，创造更好的外部消费市场，进而解决中国巨大的产能和对外贸易的诉求。所以中国是某种层面上来讲，我们当然希望世界和平、稳定、发展、增长。
The idea that China's winning, nobody's winning, right? Obviously, I think the narcissism involved in that type of analysis is really quite shameful, really. I mean, look at the economic costs, and I'm not just talking about China, but US allies and partners across the Indian Ocean region are about to get slammed. China, I think, has positioned itself a little better on the energy front, but just think of all the second layer effects of, food prices and fertilizer prices and, the cost to small business. To say China's won this, I think, is really quite a deflection to maybe look at the bigger issue of why was this started in the first place, and who's accountable for the economic consequences of it.